Today we're going to study Daniel chapter 8, and in this chapter it's going to look at the Medo-Persian kingdom, the Grecian kingdom, and then it's going to go to the future eventually for the end times kingdom. So it's going to cover, I said in one of my other videos that these last books are about the end times, but sometimes it does go back in time a little bit before you get to the end time part. So let's pick up in Daniel chapter 8, verse 1. In the 3rd year of King Belshazzar's reign, I, Daniel, had a vision after the one that had already appeared to me. Well, remember, in Daniel chapter 7, it was the 1st year of Belshazzar's reign, and Daniel was having his first vision. So now this is the second one that happens, and it comes a couple years after the first one. Verse 2. In my vision I saw myself in the citadel of Susa, in the province of Elam. In the vision I was beside the Ulai Canal. Now, Elam is what we would call modern-day Iran. So that's where he is when he gets his vision. Verse 3. I looked up, and there before me was a ram with 2 horns standing beside the canal, and the horns were long. One of the horns was longer than the other, but grew up later. I watched the ram as it charged toward the west and the north and the south. So this would indicate to me that this goat is coming from the east. If he's going towards the west, the north, and the south, that means he came out of the east. And that would make sense because the Middle East is, again, where Iran would be. No animal could stand against it, and none could rescue from its power. It did as it pleased and became great. So this is referring to the Medo-Persian Empire. We'll learn that later when Daniel gets the interpretation. Verse 5. As I was thinking about this, suddenly a goat with a prominent horn between its eyes came from the west, crossing the whole earth without touching the ground. Okay, this goat is coming from the west. The goat represents the Grecian Empire, so that makes sense. It's, again, a kingdom that would be considered part of the western parts of the world. Verse 6. It came toward the 2-horned ram I had seen standing beside the canal and charged at it in great rage. I saw it attack the ram furiously, striking the ram and shattering its 2 horns. The ram was powerless to stand against it. The goat knocked it to the ground and trampled on it, and none could rescue the ram from its power. So what is this vision? If we didn't even have the interpretation that I had given, we know that whatever this kingdom is that's in the west is going to take over and conquer the one that's from the east. And we'll see when Daniel gets the interpretation that that is what's happening. Verse 8. The goat became very great, but at the height of its power, the large horn was broken off, and in its place 4 prominent horns grew up toward the 4 winds of heaven. Now, we know that Alexander the Great was the first of the Grecian Empire to try to conquer, and who did conquer, the Medo-Persian Empire. So this goat, if it represents Alexander the Great, the first ruler represents that horn, and he was very powerful. Alexander the Great dies at a very young age, though, and he has no children that are ready to take over for him. According to one of the books I read, his wife was pregnant with their child, but at this point, there was nobody to take over his kingdom that was his heir. So his brother, who was handicapped, took it over for a while until the baby's born, but the baby's too young to rule. So what happens? These 4 prominent horns, it represents 4 of his generals that are going to end up taking a role of ruling over some of his empire. It's divided into 4 parts. Verse 9. Out of one of them came another horn, which started small but grew in power to the south and to the east and toward the beautiful land. It grew until it reached the host of heavens, and it threw some of the starry hosts down to the earth and trampled on them. I believe this is where one of the kingdoms, when it's divided, and we're going to learn it's the Seleucid dynasty, which I said earlier is going to represent either the area of Syria or Turkey, I believe, that is going to be the one that the Antichrist is going to come out of. That's what we're seeing here. This other horn that starts growing so powerful is representing the Antichrist kingdom. And that does make sense about him throwing some of the starry host down, because he's going to be possessed with Satan. And we learn in Revelation chapter 12 that there's this war in heaven. And when this war happens, Michael and his archangels throw down the third of the angels along with Satan. And that's when Satan, in the last 3.5 years, is really going big time after God's people and trying to kill the saints and having a lot of success in doing that. At that same time, when Satan is cast out of heaven, that's when this Antichrist is coming to power in Revelation chapter 13. And it says that basically he's going to be getting his power from Satan because he's possessed. It says that there's going to be one of the demons that comes out of the abyss that's going to be actually possessing him. And that we learn about that demon from the abyss in the book of Revelation that's going to possess him. Okay, verse 11. It set itself up to be as great as the commander of the army of the Lord. I think that's talking about Michael the archangel. Again, or the commander of the army of the Lord. We know that Michael is that warrior angel that is going to be blowing the trump. I believe it's him that's blowing the trump. We know there's the command of the archangel, and then there's the trumpet sound. I believe all that is Michael, because we're going to learn in Daniel chapter 11 that Michael's the one that's been asked to protect God's people at this time. It says that he is trying to keep Israel safe. So I think that's what it's referring to. If it's not referring to him, it could even be referring to Jesus himself, that he's trying to set himself up to be as great as Jesus. It says that in the rest of the verse in verse 11, it says, "It took away the daily sacrifice from the Lord, and his sanctuary was thrown down." So his sanctuary, meaning Jesus' sanctuary, and that's why it could be referring to Jesus as the commander of the army. But whatever it's referring to, this part is definitely talking about that he took away the sanctuary from God's people. The Israelites had rebuilt a temple by this time. They were offering sacrifices every day. And there's this peace agreement that I believe is going to allow the temple to be rebuilt. And then after the Antichrist has made this agreement, this peace agreement that allows Israel to rebuild a third temple, 3.5 years after that agreement, he's going to stop the animal sacrifices and set himself up in the temple and proclaim that he's God. And so we're going to see that as it keeps carrying out. And it's also talked about in Revelation, chapter 13. It talks again about him having authority over the area. And in Revelation 11, it says that the Gentiles are going to trample on Jerusalem for the last 3.5 years. Okay, verse 12. Because of rebellion, the Lord's people and the daily sacrifice were given over to it. It prospered in everything it did, and truth was thrown to the ground. Now, this is the reason why I think possibly something is going on in Israel with God's people that is making him angry. I don't think it's just what happened during the first century when the Jews had been responsible for killing the apostles and a lot of the saints. But maybe so, because sometimes God has waited hundreds of years before he takes out his wrath for something that was done earlier. But whatever this rebellion is, it could be something even going on at the time of when Jesus is about to come back. Maybe God's people are practicing all kinds of evil, and I know right now it's known that Israel is the most homosexual friendly country. Like, they're known for that. So they are not staying true to God's law in his ways. They're not a holy people right now. And again, they're going to be in rebellion until Jesus comes back. There's a lot of them that just are not living the right kind of way when Jesus comes back. And that's where in Zechariah chapter 13, it says that he's going to have mercy on them and he's going to take away their sin at that time. They've been doing all kinds of bad stuff, and maybe that's part of the reason why God's allowing this judgment to come on them during this time. But whatever the reason, The Antichrist, it says in verse 12 that he's going to have success and he's going to prosper in everything he does. Truth is going to be thrown to the ground. It's going to be hard to find anybody teaching the truth at this time. Verse 13. Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to him, how long will it take for the vision to be fulfilled? The vision concerning the daily sacrifice, the rebellion that causes desolation, the surrender of the sanctuary, and the trampling underfoot of the Lord's people. He said to me, it will take 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary will be reconsecrated. Well, I believe that it's going to take a while to rebuild the temple, and if you were to take that 2,300 evenings, that would put about 7 months and 10 days to rebuild the temple before the sacrifices are starting. And because this equals 6 years and about 4 months and 20 days. So if we got a total of 7 years, I believe that this incorporates everything, but it's only 2,300 evenings and mornings that it's going to be that they begin the sacrifices, but in the middle of it, it's going to stop. And after the 2,300 evenings and mornings, Jesus is the one that's going to reconsecrate the sanctuary. I believe there's going to be a millennial temple, that the temple that is going to be the third one that's built during this peace agreement during the last 7 years. There's going to be a huge earthquake when Jesus comes back, and I believe the whole thing has fallen apart again, and that's again where it can be double prophecy about the temple. Not one stone will be left upon another. It happened in 70 AD. It can happen again right before Jesus comes back with this big earthquake that has happened. And so Jesus will end up having to rebuild another temple because he is in the temple. In Zechariah chapter 14, there is a temple there, and we see in Ezekiel chapter 40 through chapter 48, it describes this temple that's never been rebuilt yet. And even the people that have seen the plans for a third temple say it doesn't follow what Ezekiel chapters 40 through 48 is talking about. So I believe that that's talking about a millennial temple. So that will be the one that Jesus will build once he comes back. And he'll reconsecrate the whole Jerusalem, and anything that was used in the temple, everything will have to be reconsecrated because it's been defiled by this Antichrist. Verse 15. While I, Daniel, was watching the vision and trying to understand it, there before me stood one who looked like a man. And I heard a man's voice from Ulai calling, Gabriel, tell this man the meaning of the vision. Where have we heard of Gabriel before? He was the angel that told Zechariah that he was going to have a son, John the Baptist. He was also the angel that came and told Mary that she was going to have a baby conceived by the Holy Spirit, and she was to name him Jesus. So we know who this archangel is. We've heard of Gabriel before, and Daniel gets to see Gabriel. And Gabriel is going to tell the man the meaning of the vision, which the man is Daniel. Verse 17. As he came near the place where I was standing, I was terrified and fell prostrate. See, every time it seems like people see angels, no matter how righteous they are, Daniel was a righteous man. They couldn't find any fault in him when they were trying to trip him up in Daniel chapter 6. Yet he knows he's still a sinful man. In the presence of a holy angel or Jesus, we see our sin, and we see how unholy we are as compared to them. And there's just this reaction. It seems like it's the same thing every time. People are terrified. And many times the angel's saying, do not fear, because he knows that that's our reaction. The most mankind react to an angel that way. So he says, I was terrified and fell prostrate. Son of man, he said to me, understand that the vision concerns the time of the end. Now, he's very clearly saying this vision is covering and talking about the time of the end, and yet many people will say this vision happened in 70 AD. Well, that's not the time of the end. The time of the end isn't going to be till Jesus comes back. So people try to make this fit into different things, but if you just keep it in the proper context, I believe it's going to be very clear that it's talking about the end times right before Jesus comes back. Verse 18. While he was speaking to me, I was in a deep sleep with my face to the ground. Sounds like he passed out because he was so scared. That's what it sounds like to me. Then he touched me and raised me to my feet. He said, I am going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath. And remember, when Jesus comes back, it says that's the time of wrath, that his wrath is going to come upon the earth. So I know there was wrath on the earth in 70 AD as well, but not all these events happened in 70 AD. Again, 19, he said, I am going to tell you what will happen later in the time of wrath because the vision concerns the appointed time of the end. The two-horned ram that you saw represents the kings of Media and Persia. So again, we're getting the interpretation. We learned that the ram represents the kings of Media and Persia. That, again, was the Darius, Cyrus, and some of the other kings that are going to come after them. Verse 21, the shaggy goat is the king of Greece. So there we learned, again, the Grecian Empire. And the large horn between its eyes is the first king. The first king of that empire was Alexander the Great. The four horns that replace the one that was broken off represent four kingdoms that will emerge from his nation, but will not have the same power. So again, when he dies young and he does not have an heir to take over his throne, the generals step up and they divide the nation, the Grecian Empire, into four main parts. Some people will say there was more, but there were four main generals that most scholars will say were the ones representing that nation at that time. Verse 23, in the latter part of their reign, who's the there? The four generals, the four kingdoms that have been emerged from being split up from the four generals. During the latter part of their reign, when rebels have become completely wicked, so the earth is going to be very wicked by the time that Jesus comes back. It says it's going to be like the days of Noah, I think in more than one way. Not just that people are going to be unaware of judgment that's about to come on the earth, but that it's so wicked that God is saying that these rebels have become so completely wicked. So when that happens in the latter part of their reign, it says a master of intrigue will arise. A master of intrigue. When I think of intrigue, I think of somebody that can do false miracles, and we learn that the Antichrist is going to be able to do miracles through the false prophet. The false prophet is actually the one performing the miracles, but he's saying he's doing it by the power of the beast. So the beast gets credit for all these miracles that are going to be done, and it intrigues the people. They think, oh, this has got to be a deity because look at what he's able to do, these miracles. Verse 24, he will become very strong, but not by his own power. What did we say? There was going to be an evil spirit that's going to possess him and give him his power. Satan says he's going to give him his authority and power. So this again matches what's happening with the beast in Revelation chapter 13. It's not his own power that's able to conquer the saints, but the power of Satan. Satan is the one on the warpath and conquering the saints, and God has given him authority to be able to do that because we're being tested. And we need to stay strong and pass our tests, even if it means that we have to give up our life. He will cause astounding devastation and will succeed in whatever he does. He will destroy those who are mighty, the holy people. So again, here it is. The saints are going to be conquered. Why? Because it's our test. Verse 25. He will cause deceit to prosper, and he will consider himself superior. Again, deceit. He's going to be full of deception through these false miracles, through false teaching, through just his arrogant, boastful words that he says. He's going to convince people that he is like God. He's not going to say he's Jesus, but he's going to say he doesn't believe in Jesus. He doesn't believe in God the Father. He doesn't believe in Jesus. He doesn't believe in any other God. He's going to say, I'm the God above any God you've ever heard of. So he's trying to take prominence on any God that's ever existed. And you'll see why I say that later on, because it'll give us a clue later. When they feel secure, he will destroy many and take his stand against the Prince of Princes. Okay, so when they feel secure, who's the they? We look at Ezekiel chapter 38. This talks about the battle that's coming to of Armageddon, and this guy that's called Gog, he's also known as the Antichrist. He is going to attack Israel when they've had this peace agreement, they're living in security, they're thinking everything's great. And it's not until he attacks them that they realize that they're not as secure as they thought they were. This guy's breaking the peace agreement, and he's going to end up at the end coming against the Prince of Princes. The same man is the one that's going to fight against who's the Prince of Princes? Jesus. He thinks he can conquer Jesus when he's coming back with the armies. Of course, we know how that's going to go. Yet he will be destroyed, but not by human power. So whose power is going to destroy him? Jesus's. Jesus is going to conquer him, and that happens in Revelation chapter 19. The vision of the evenings and mornings that has been given you is true, but seal up the vision, for it concerns the distant future. So Daniel lived, remember, he was around 500 and something BC. So we've waited so far 2,000 years almost since the time that Jesus died and was resurrected, and he still hasn't come back. So if this vision concerns the distant future, that makes sense. It's been 2,500 and something years, and it still hasn't come true. So it's not talking about 70 AD, it's talking about the time of the end. Verse 27, I, Daniel, was worn out. I lay exhausted for several days. Then I got up and went about the king's business. I was appalled by the vision. It was beyond understanding. So even though he had had the angel tell him the meaning of it, he still couldn't wrap his mind around what in the world he was seeing and how everything was going to come together. So if he couldn't understand that, we're going to learn at the end of the book of Daniel where it says that no one will understand until it gets time closer to the end. People are increasing in knowledge and traveling from here to there. That would be time of the present time. We've got airplanes, we've got the internet. People, our knowledge and our ability to understand things is increasing so rapidly, and the mode of transportation has become almost no stumbling block at all. I mean, we can get around very easily nowadays with planes and stuff. So I think that was another reason why Daniel couldn't understand it. God didn't want him to have an understanding of it yet. He didn't even want the people in the next 200 years after Daniel wrote it to understand. He's told to seal the book up, that it's not going to be understood until it gets closer to this time where people are increasing in knowledge and traveling isn't a problem. And so it was meant to not be understood. God wanted him not to understand it at this point. But regardless of whether he understands it or not, he knows it's going to be terrible. And that's why he's trembling. And again, he just has such a hard time. Every time he gets one of these visions, it's very exhausting on him. And remember, he's probably close to 90 years old at this time. Well, this is during, I think, Belshazzar's reign, isn't it? Let me see. We said I think it was the third year of Belshazzar's reign. So he's a little bit younger. Because remember, it wasn't until Belshazzar's 17th year that his kingdom is taken away from him. So this would be about 14 years before that. So he's probably in his 70s. He's not quite as old as when Cyrus is going to get into power and Darius is, but he's still an older man. I mean, 70-year-olds are not, they're not spring chickens. Okay, so that's where we're going to end the study today.